If you can think of a popular productivity book, I've read it. Some transformed my life, others made my blood boil. But as my responsibilities grew, I realised my quest for ever-increasing productivity was turning my life into a walking anxiety dream. Meditations for Mortals gave me a completely new way of thinking about what it means to be productive and cured my addiction to productivity hacks. In this video, I'll share 5 powerful lessons from the book that help me focus on what truly matters and finally let go of the impossible goal of doing everything. There are so many things I want to do in the year ahead. I want to start street performing again. I want to grow this YouTube channel. I want to put energy into the business I run and the people I work with. I want to be strong. I want to be lean. I want to play the penny whistle in a folk band. Can you spot the problem here? Most modern productivity books focus on systems and hacks designed to help you do more. But the subtext is, you can and should. And if you don't, you'll fall behind and fail to achieve your potential. At least in my case, this belief has sort of crept into my subconsciousness and has left me feeling overwhelmed pretty much all the time. So I'm constantly trying out new productivity techniques and hacks, and somehow that seems to make things worse. We're only here for a brief moment in time, and there are far more worthwhile things that we could pursue that we'll just never get around to. So the first lesson of this book is to not only accept this reality, but to embrace it. It's an outlook that he calls imperfectionism. And when this idea finally landed with me, it helped me to stop struggling to do everything and to really pour myself into a few things that actually matter. Now at this point you might be thinking, okay, so I can't do everything, but what should I do? How do I actually prioritize? And he offers some really great advice on this too. Now, particularly if you're a busy person with lots of responsibilities, the decision on how to spend your time can feel like a really important one. And there are tons of prioritization techniques out there. And in fact, in my last video, I shared one called The Wheel of Life that helps you evaluate different aspects of your life in terms of how satisfied you are as a way of figuring out how to use your time. Now, Bergman has a completely different take on this challenge, which is to look for the life task. Now, a life task is something that life is calling you to do. Something to qualify as a life task, it has to satisfy 2 rules. The first of them is that it needs to be something that's actually going to take a bunch of effort that will enlarge you in the process. And the second is that, different to a calling or a destiny, it has to be something that you can actually do within the constraints of your life. Now, I love prioritization techniques like the Wheel of Life, and I think for lots of people, they're super useful. But on so many occasions, I've had this intuitive sense I've been using them just to come to a conclusion that I wanted to, or as a way of avoiding working on the thing that I actually needed to work on. And since reading this book, whenever I've been struggling to figure out how to prioritize my time, I found that asking what's the life task here has been a good way of just cutting to the chase and narrowing in on the thing that I probably already knew subconsciously that I actually needed to be prioritizing. But even if you do narrow in on what the life task is, it turns out for most people, regardless of what their goal is, the most difficult part is actually just getting started. And he has some really helpful advice here too in the form of a metaphor. To help make sense of this, I'll give you an example from my own life. About a year ago, I decided that I wanted to be able to jump higher so that maybe just once, before it was too late, I would be able to dunk a basketball. So I started researching programs online that would increase my vertical leap. I bought new trainers that would cushion my landing. I even bought a new basketball so that I could practice at my local court. A month into the journey, I hadn't jumped once. The magnitude of the task felt overwhelming, so I gave up and moved on. I don't think this experience is uncommon. The fact that I wanted to jump higher is neither here nor there. I could have equally wanted to write a book or start a business. There are so many people, myself included, who are way more comfortable being the kind of person that plans how they're going to become a different person instead of actually just doing something about it. And Bergman offers 2 images to help clarify why this might be the case in the form of the kayak and the superyacht. According to Bergman, life is like being in a 1-person kayak. We're traveling down a river that we've never explored before. We're at the mercy of the tide and the elements. We have to steer in response to the obstacles we find along the way, using the skills and resources that we have at that given moment. But most of us want to believe that we're in a superyacht where we can just boop, 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 plug in our destination, sit in the swivel chair and wait till we arrive. Now, I was treating this goal of jumping higher with a superyacht mentality, pretending like all the planning and the buying of new kit and equipment was going to do the work for me. Now, there's some merit in doing that stuff so that you start on the right foot, but the hardest thing for most of us is just to spend an hour, half an hour, 15 minutes, whatever it is, doing the thing. It doesn't have to be jumping higher. It could be eating more healthily. It could be starting a new creative project or launching a business. So the lesson here is to remember that you're not in a super yacht. You're in a kayak. And I love this idea. So if getting started is a cornichon size problem, then keeping going is more of an orange size problem. Honestly, I just wanted to say the word cornichon. A few years ago, I flew to Dublin to see a lecture by one of my heroes in magic, David Benn. It was honestly one of the most inspiring evenings of my life. He performed and demonstrated for 4 hours straight, and each routine was more magical than the last. Every word, gesture, nuance was carefully considered, and he had the audience transfixed and baffled in equal measure. At the end of the lecture, somebody asked David a question about his process for developing routines, and his answer really stuck with me. Slowly. Now, at this point, he was in his late 50s and had been performing professionally for about 40 years. And his goal, he said, was to try and create 2 or 3 A-material new routines every year. And before you knew it, he had more than enough material to last him a lifetime of shows. In a section of the book titled On Finding Focus, he shares a passage from the economist Adam Smith that reminded me of this experience. The man who works moderately, so as to be able to work constantly, not only preserves his health the longest, but in the course of the year executes the greatest amount of work. If you watched my last video, you'll know my main goal this year is to try and grow this channel. At the moment, I can share a video about once a month. Now, I know if I was to release a video every fortnight or even better, once a week, I'd reach my goal much more quickly. But I also know that increasing my output like this would smash me into the ground. It would almost certainly affect my sanity and impact my long-term progress. So the lesson here is, rather than try and squeeze out every morsel of productivity each day, better to find 2 or 3 hours daily-ish where you focus on your goal, make some concrete progress, and before you know it, time will have passed and you will have accomplished an enormous amount, hopefully while still enjoying the process. But regardless of how sustainable a pace you work at, en route to achieving your goal, you're gonna come across situations where you just don't want to do certain things, but they're going to be absolutely necessary for you to keep making progress, and if you don't do them, then you won't. So what do you do in these circumstances? Well, before we get onto that, if you're still watching, then you are part of a group of 20% of people who are still watching at this stage. So my guess is you're finding this information quite interesting. One way you can help me to achieve my goal this year is by giving the video a like and leaving me a comment to let me know why you stuck around. That'll help other people to find this video in future. And if you're feeling really kind, I'd also be really grateful if you subscribe to the channel. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, bumping up against things that you don't really want to do, but that are necessary to do. Let's talk about this in the context of an example. Learning a new language, that's something that lots of people want to do. I'm pretty well qualified to talk about this. I have learned 2 new languages. I then forgot them both and have relearned them. It's a long story. The thing that's going to supercharge your progress in this example is putting yourself in situations where you have to use the language in conversation. But that's the scariest part, right? So lots of people avoid it and then their progress stalls. Another example, this YouTube growth journey that I'm on now, my kryptonite is writing scripts. I procrastinate, I do all kinds of things to avoid doing the hard work of sitting down and organizing my thoughts. For people faced with this kind of challenge, Berkman offers a really wonderful insight that he's borrowed from the Dutch Zen monk Paul Lumens. His advice is, rather than seeing these kinds of tasks like gnawing rats, that the more you ignore, the worse they become, you should try and reframe your relationship with them. You should try and befriend your rats. This is kind of like a psychological trick, or I guess a mindset shift that for me has really worked, because now when I'm faced with tasks that are necessary but I really don't want to do, instead of seeing them as things that I have to force myself to do through gritted teeth, just see them as another part of the process that I can embrace. If some of the lessons from this book are resonating with you, then you should definitely read it. My guess is they're resonating with you because you're really busy, you've got responsibilities, but you also want to learn new skills or maybe explore a creative passion. If that's you, then you should definitely check out this video up here, which consolidates my favorite lessons from the only book you need to reignite your creativity. Thanks for watching.